And it's actually from the book of Esther in the Bible, of all places. It talks about Mordecai, who was a leader in that time.
A leader is also a light in the darkness.
I think differently, and now I believe in myself because I'm around him, and I think even more is possible.
Welcome to Leading Lubbock, where we highlight the voices shaping our city and beyond. I'm your host, Ruben Trujillo, and today, get ready, because we have an absolutely incredible guest. Bob Goff is a best-selling author, a dynamic speaker, and a man who lives out love in the most action-oriented way possible. You might know him from Love Does, Everybody Always, Undistracted, or his latest book, Catching Whimsy, all of which inspire us to live with boldness, purpose, and joy. In this conversation, Bob brings his trademark energy and wisdom as we talk about the power of vulnerability and leadership, what it really means to love people well, and how embracing whimsy can open doors to unexpected opportunities. We also touch on Love Does, the nonprofit he founded that makes an incredible impact around the world. So whether you're driving, working out, or just taking a breather, lean in. You're about to be encouraged, challenged, and maybe even inspired to take a big leap of faith. Let's jump in. Okay, today is a very special day. I get to talk and have a great conversation with a good friend of mine, Bob Goff. Bob, thank you first off for coming on today to share a little bit of your story and leadership and what all of that has meant to you and how it's evolved over the years. Thank you for joining us.
You bet. I like your choice of words, evolve, because I think for people in general, and particularly people in leadership, it does evolve constantly. It's that it starts as one thing, and then the adventure leads to somewhere else and somewhere else and somewhere else. And so as you're lily padding from one set of circumstances, one set of problems and challenges to the other, to learn how to evolve, to adapt, and to figure out what are going to be some of the core things that I'm have learned along the way. So I was a lawyer at one point for, 30 years. And because I'm older than dirt, that was a long time ago. And then I evolved from lawyer to, it turns out I can write books. So I started writing books now and again. And then the books were financing some schools that I wanted to see happen overseas. And then they sold a number of books. And so then we ended up in 14 countries. And so now I'm trying to be famous with my family. I don't want to be famous lawyer. I don't want to be famous author. I want to be famous with my grandkids. And so I can still maintain some of those things that I'm good at. I know you're good at a whole ton of things. Probably people listening have all kinds of gifts, but I don't want to be limited by my capabilities. And I think that is part of that evolutionary process you mentioned.
Yeah. So Bob, I know a lot of people know your story, just and even some of the stories about, Uganda and the books that you've written and I know you also talk about the person who's at the tire shop a lot. And one of the things that I love about this is a podcast geared toward those in our community here in Lubbock, Texas. And for just a brief explanation of why I even asked you to come on here, Bob, is you have been so instrumental in my life, and you and I have had some conversations before that have led me to the point of launching Clear Rock Realty, that I'm now being able to lead some agents in their journey. And also, the evolution of this podcast stemmed from conversations with you and being able to listen to you. So I love that your influence on a San Diego level, across, a few states away, is having such an impact already on people's lives here in Lubbock. And as you're talking about the evolution of your leadership, I want to also talk, how can we maybe point that toward the person at the tire shop or the greeter at the local store? What lessons do you have that maybe you can impart on them? Those who aren't in these high leadership positions, but those that just you run into on the streets.
Yeah, I like I didn't grow up in a church and speak at them often, but don't go to them. But I love one of the letters that's in there from a guy named Paul, and he said, he was talking about another friend of his named Timothy, and he said the thing about Timothy, he said he takes a genuine interest in other people's welfare. So I really think, as I've experienced you, you take an interest in other people's welfare. I think people in leadership take an interest not just in people that can benefit them in the marketplace, but as you said, the person at the corner store, the guy at the tire shop, the mail carrier. They take a genuine interest. It's not because they're gadflies and want to spread stories about everybody. They're just genuinely interested in how is the life working for you? What's working? What isn't working? And then to say, can I take anything from that? We have a lot of refugees here in San Diego from a number of different countries that have had some setbacks. And so I had originally been traveling to those countries like Afghanistan, and then 10,000 Afghans moved to San Diego. So it's like Kabul just arrived here. And so it just saved me so much time on airplanes to try to make a contribution to their welfare. And so I think you can do both. I think sometimes what we think is binary, that we have to decide this or this. It's really, you can do both. I got a girls' school in Afghanistan, which is crazy that they let us continue to operate that. But then we've got all these families like right here. I think people can take a genuine interest in the marketplace in what they're doing that is viable in the marketplace, which I think is really a keen thing. And then on top of that, say, hey, if there's some leftover, what can I do to somebody else if I've got this resource of additional time or energy or creativity? And to say, what can I do to move the needle in somebody else's life? And that isn't just trying to be swell or an exercise of your faith, although it is all of those things. It's also something that keeps you sharp and engaged. And that's one of the hallmarks of you and the way that you engage people with leadership. You're just engaged. You want to know why it is that people do what they do. You want to lead a team and you want to get underneath the surface, not just telling people what to do, but to explore why do we do what we do?
Thank you. I appreciate that. Well, was there anything along your journey that really impacted your life? You would say like that was a key moment in shaping who I am today as a leader and influencing people's lives around me?
Yeah, totally. I would say it was the day I realized I'm not my dad. And you would think it'd be self-evident, but a lot of us think that we're our mom or our best friend or whoever's the, popular, whatever it is, infill that. Sometimes you need to realize that God made you uniquely you. And so your you-iness, not a word, but ought to be. But to just realize you are you with all of your picadillos and failings and vacuums and voids in your life, but that you bring that to the table. And so when I decided not to be somebody else, it was really freeing. I go like, I'm still just figuring it out at 66, but like there's something freeing about realizing why you do what you do. And if you figure out the origin story of some of your insecurities, that could be a great place to start. If you're insecure about, and then insert here, whatever that is, say, I wonder where that came from. And I wouldn't get wrapped around the axle in endless introspection, but it would be definitely worthwhile to say, I wonder what that's connected to in my life. Think of your attribute that you have, and then what that might be connected to, and then think of your biggest fear and what that might be connected to. Any come to mind for you? I was going to flip it. Like say what I'll filibuster while you're thinking about that. My question that I ask in every room that I enter into, whether it's like this or speaking this weekend or next weekend or the weekend after, is, am I wanted? And so you would think the answer is yes, because you were actually invited to go there. But yet the invitation alone isn't enough to convince me I'm wanted. And it's not that I want somebody to grovel or to whatever. I go in with a bias towards that I'm probably not wanted here. They just want me there's something that I can add, but I'm not really wanted. And so it would beg the question, I wonder, where did that belief system come from? And so if you figure out the origin story of the questions that you ask yourself quietly, then it can lead to more clarity. So
Yeah.
there we go. How about for you? What's your
Oh,
question?
well, the reason I even chuckled is because that's been a journey that I've been on over the last few months, honestly. So I've not, and I wouldn't say dissected, because I've been also on the lines of be careful, don't get too caught up in it and all consumed by it. But yet, let's explore. Let's get behind the curtain a little bit.
You know,
And
somebody who wrote a great book about that, I don't know if you flipped through that, Mike Foster wrote a book called Seven Primal Questions. A 45-minute read if you stop for 15 minutes to get coffee. I mean, it is such a quick read, but he would say that there's seven questions that we're born with. Each of us might identify more with one or another. Am I safe? Am I secure? Am I loved? Am I wanted? Am I successful? Am I enough? Am I leading a purposeful life? And he would argue that the big question that you ask, like for me, it's am I wanted? Maybe it's for you as well. That's also your superpower. That's what you bring into every room. You make people feel wanted.
yeah,
Oh, I
yeah.
put my cell phone number in the back of 3 million books. Like I want people to know you're wanted, you're worth it. Oh, I
Yeah.
wrote a book called Everybody Always. You're
Mhm.
wanted, you're wanted.
Mm,
So can you see how if we can figure out what's that underlying
mm.
question, then we can actually delight in saying that actually might be the gift that we bring with it. Think of it as
Yeah.
a primal question, and he would say that is a primal gift.
Yeah. So the two that have come to mind, and I'm going to say two because you've already stolen one of them, but they go hand in hand of I feel defective, or am I defective? And does that lead me to not being wanted? Is that
Oh,
the reason why I'm not wanted? So I've had to go through that journey too of like, what do I feel like are the things that are wrong with me internally? Because those are the things I've been putting a mask in front of my face of for many years. And
yeah.
vulnerability for a long time hadn't existed. And then my journey has been very similar to yours, which is even why I've agreed, like, been okay to put myself out there on a podcast, not knowing who's going to listen to it, because it's a scary, vulnerable thing to not know who's listening and what they're saying or what they're laughing about or how they're judging. And yet to say, you know what, I am enough and I am okay and I am wanted, to explore those things. I think even taking those sevens and maybe looking at it and saying, how is there truth behind each one of these? Am I secure, and why am I secure? Am I enough?
Yeah.
Why am I enough? And allowing us to
Yeah.
go down that road.
You pull on the strings, you say, what are the rules that you've made for yourself? So I think for everybody listening, there might be, think back to high school when you had a sweetheart and somebody you liked a lot, and then they blew you off or broke up or, went out with somebody else. And so you make one of the silly rules. You go, I'll never love again. Like those passion as you're driving home in the banana seat of your Stingray. So you say, I'll never love again. And that
Mm,
rule was actually scaffolding for your 11-year-old heart because you didn't
yeah.
know how to process this rush of emotions. And
Mm,
so you made a rule that provided you some of the support you needed to make it through there. And yet, when I was 22 and couldn't go out on a date, wasn't because I didn't ask, I just had no takers. It was because I had this rule that I'm not wanted. And so I'm going to keep it really shallow with everybody. I'm not going to talk about what's really going on in my life because I'm sure I'm not wanted. I'm going to get rejected anyway. So why talk about anything deep? And nobody wants to go out with that guy that's just like
mm,
1 inch deep. And so the scaffolding that helped me when I was 11 actually was imprisoning me when I was 22. And so you have to say, what are the rules I made? Were they true then? Are they still true? Were they ever true?
yeah.
And to kind of write over it and to say, you know what, actually, I am wanted.
Yeah.
If faith guides your steps, you're wanted by God. If it doesn't, like maybe you've got a pet that really perks up when you walk in the room. I'm like,
Hmm.
wanted.
Yeah.
That'd be the best thing about getting on that FBI, number one, and be like, I'm wanted.
I'm wanted. There is somebody
I
out
had to go
there.
knock off a liquor store.
Oh, it's great. So you have a good friend, Don Miller, and he
Yeah.
has a book, Scary Close. And I read that book, and I actually, through a couple different conversations, I journeyed through Onsite. over at your place at the Oaks. And so that was pretty fundamental for me too. And digging into that little Ruben, the little boy.
Yeah.
And that was great. And I know not everybody has those access points necessarily, the opportunities for something like that. To the everyday listener here, where do you even begin when you think like, I do have insecurities and I have those things that are holding me back? How do I start to identify that? And once it's like beginning to be identified, where do I take it? How can I just practically one step start down that journey?
Yeah, Starbucks. Like really just invite a friend who knows you really well, who trusts you, and say, I want you to meet me at Starbucks. I want you to pay because I don't have $5 for a coffee. And then we're going to do 3 minutes of authenticity. So I'm going to talk for 3 minutes and tell you what it feels like to be me. And then I want you to talk for 3 minutes and tell you what it feels like to be you. So there's something beautiful, and you can't correct me if I feel like I'm insecure, I feel inadequate, I feel like an imposter. Then it's not helpful for this exercise to say, no, you actually have a lot to be secure about. You are enough and you're
Sure.
not an imposter. I'm not trying to get you to help me out. I'm going to try to tell you while I'm telling me what it feels like to be me. And then I want to listen as you tell me what it feels like to be you. I think
Mm,
that's the entry point, and it's a big, broad one. And you're not limited by the economics of it. You're not limited because you need, a week to do that. I think you need 3 minutes
mm,
to get real and another 3 minutes to listen. And
yeah.
there's something really beautiful and freeing about that as you start exercising that muscle. Not that that's how you interact with everybody, but you ought to interact with somebody
Yeah.
that way.
Yeah.
And if you say, like, I don't know a friend who would do that with me, that would be great. Now you're in the market for a friend that would do that with you.
Mm.
And you could even ask somebody, just say, I know this sounds nuts, but could we meet at Starbucks? You pay. And we're going to do 3 minutes from me, and I need 3 minutes from you. So we'll be done in 6 minutes if you want. But that's going to be our thing. And we'll go full Vegas on it. What happens here stays here.
Mm.
So
Mm.
you're wondering if these are going to be the stories that are repeated, but there's something beautiful about finding safe people and then practicing a little vulnerability.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's helpful. And there's something about community too. Like to not do this thing alone. I mean,
Yeah, and if you can't find one, make one.
make one. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Oh, I love that. If you could see little Bob and you go visit him, let's say maybe anywhere from 7-year-old Bob to 27-year-old Bob, and you say, I want to impart on you a piece of wisdom that I have learned along the way. And I just want you to realize this truth now. So you don't have to wait until X or Y or Z happens down the road. I want you to know this now. What would that lesson be?
I think I would talk to little Bobby Goff and say it'll work, and if it doesn't, something else will happen.
Mm.
It's almost like stating the obvious, but I would want to put the bias on it will work. Like I think
Ah.
it'll work. Sometimes we talk ourselves out of some really great ideas.
Mm.
Uh, Instead of saying that what might go wrong, just say what might be unleashed, what might happen. I want to
Yeah.
fail trying. I don't want to
Mm.
fail watching.
Mm.
And that kind of an idea, that kind of a bias towards what's possible, will free some things up, and you'll have a couple ideas that'll crater, and a couple that'll work. And so when
Oh,
I'm not keeping score. I don't have
yeah.
a win-loss column.
Yeah.
But you say, I'm going to give that a whirl, see if that works. And then, gosh, all of a sudden you'll get some inexplicable yes or an even more inexplicable no. You'd be like, dude, I
Mm.
really thought that one was going to work. If you were to peel back most of the decisions we make, I think you'd probably agree that they're uh, primarily underneath them is they're driven by love, or they're driven by fear, or they're driven by some combination of love and fear. So
Mhm.
what sometimes we say, why did you ask the girl out on the date? Because I was loved her. I just couldn't, I can't not. I know that's a double negative.
Mm.
Or why did you not ask her? Or why did you not go for that big job? And you say, oh, I was afraid that I wouldn't, whatever. Or you feel a little ambivalent, like the little equal parts of both. But again, if we can tug on that to say, is this connected to fear or love, or what portion of a combination
Mhm.
play? And if we operate from knowing where that's coming from, now we got a ball game. If you don't know why you're doing what you're doing, you got an adolescent,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? And we need, that's why adolescence is so hard, because you don't know what the hell's going on. So if we could understand the return address on these things, now we've got a fighting chance of figuring that out. And to
Yeah.
say it's fear, then say as why am I fearful? We go, well, last time I got shot. Maybe like that would be a really legit reason
Sure.
to be fearful of that whatever that circumstance is. Um, but then instead of talking, I've never gone to Mogadishu, Somalia, and not gotten shot at. Never gotten hit, but every single time. And it's they're not like trying to kill you. It's just like a really violent hello.
Yeah.
You'll see some guy up on a
You're
roof,
here.
and they'll just shoot in your direction.
You're
Uh,
here, and we want you to know we're here too.
I know, I see you.
Yeah.
So, what I want us to do is to say, well, I want to continue to operate schools in Mogadishu, so I'm going to continue to go. And what I'll do is spend a little bit less time on the roof. I mean,
Mhm.
instead of saying I'm going to spend less time in Somalia, I'm going to say I'm going to spend less time on
Mhm.
roofs in
Mhm.
Somalia. So, wouldn't that just be such a rational way to go instead of saying, I got shot at, I'm out of here, I'm never coming back? I would say I would get off the roof,
Yeah.
or go up at night, but just probably not at noon.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I would say instead review some of the rules that you've made for yourself. I'll never love again. I'll never go to Mogadishu. I'll never, whatever the rule that you've made, I'm never trying for the raise. It's impolite to ask. Say, what's the return address of that? Is that founded mostly in love or mostly in fear? And then if you live with a little bit greater anticipation and expectation,
Mm.
not a presumptuous kind of expectation. Nobody likes that person. There's a really great verse, another thing that Paul wrote. It said that all of heaven is up on its tiptoes, just
Mm.
waiting to see what will be revealed in your life. And I
Yeah.
really like that idea, just like up on tiptoes, waiting to see what will happen, living
Mm.
with that kind of anticipation. I wonder what will happen if Ruben and I are buddies. I wonder what will happen if I go on that dirt bike ride. I wonder happen if like living at that kind of anticipation. And if you're in a job that has drained you of the kind of energy to start anticipating and dreaming and all that, I would say it's time to wonder what it would look like to have a different job.
Mm. Get that little bit of a whimsy back,
I
maybe.
know, right?
Yeah.
But I would call it a strategic whimsy. It's not
Mm.
just whimsy, because that feels like unicorns and confetti. I would say strategic whimsy. Underneath a bunch of joy is a mile of strategy. Let you
Man.
know why you're doing what you're doing.
Yeah. So we're moving in this direction, and I heard there's this book out, and I'd love to hear a little bit about it because whimsy's in the title of it. So
Oh,
Bob,
yeah,
tell
yeah,
us a little bit about what you're working on. What's in the book?
Well, yeah, think about strategy. Like we all are going to leave a legacy behind. For others, it'll be a more brief legacy than others. Some people, it's as if they're living in a way that they'll be quickly forgotten.
Mm.
There are other people that are living and putting their names on buildings and faces on rocks in the Dakotas. And there's nothing wrong with that, but that just says that that's a different version. But I just decided during this little bit of time I have here on this marble, I'm going to write some books.
Yeah.
And I find it incredibly tedious, but there's going to be someday I'm going to end up in a jar. And between now and then, I want to leave some evidence behind that I was here. So I'm not telling people what they ought to do, but I'm just writing to my kids. I want them
Mm.
to think of some of the things we've been talking about, ask the questions about what that's connected to. So whatever it is that you do, if you're a baker, I would leave behind some stories about baking.
Yeah.
If you're a
Yeah.
lawyer, leave lawyer stories behind, but don't be limited to those things. So catching whimsy was just me taking 365 days plus leap year, so 366, and then finding a story for each day, a lived experience, and then connecting it to some of the books or letters that when they were all bound together, we called it the Bible. But I didn't grow up
Mm.
talking about Bibles and churches and all that. But Paul wrote a whole bunch of these letters, and then these other books that are together. Oftentimes, there's something in there. They just go like, that actually is worth thinking about. The idea about guarding your heart, the idea from Zechariah about not despising small beginnings, because the
Yeah.
Lord delights in watching the work begin. And then to think of a story that goes with that might launch people into their day with a little bit more anticipation.
Mm. I love that. Well, Bob, you mention a lot of questions whenever you're talking. It's like maybe you live in a world of questions of I wonder why, or what was it that caused this, or
Yes.
is that something you think about often? Is we should live in a world of question asking, or
Just so weird though. I'd just be curious. Sisyphus was a guy I was writing about today. He's the guy that wasn't very hospitable to people in Greek mythology, and what he was destined to for eternity, and this will sound familiar, is to push a large rock uphill. And
Hmm.
so whenever he got to almost the top of the hill, the rock would fall to the bottom.
Hmm.
And Sisyphus would have to go to the bottom of that hill and push that big rock up. So in the business community, we think, it's like pushing a rock uphill. That's just borrowing from Greek mythology what happened to Sisyphus, and it happened to him because he wasn't hospitable. And so what I want to do is when I meet somebody, be hospitable. Because I'm pushing enough rocks uphill already. How about you? Yeah, so I want another one. So I would trust Jesus a lot more than Greek mythology, but I'm always curious about some of the stories and where they came from, and is there something I can learn from them? So that kind of curiosity, if that is the way that you live, then write that stuff down. If you think in allegories, like it's kind of like this. There's a famous book called Hind's Feet on High Places. There's a deer. It's called a hind, which is a deer, and it's called Much Afraid. And so Much Afraid is trying to make her way up the hill, and Pilgrim's Progress, another
Uh-huh.
allegory. So
Yeah.
whatever it is that connects with you, and I'm reading about Plato's, these guys that are trying to get out of a cave this morning. So it's not like this high level thinking. I'm just like, these guys are chained in a cave and they don't know that there's anything other than what's in the cave, but then they get released and they just don't know whether to go towards the light or not.
Mm.
That's another way of saying the movie, The Matrix. I like to say what is real and what isn't. I'll just put some famous actor in and said, pick a red or blue pill, but they got that from Plato.
Mm.
So I just find that stuff interesting, and I want to stay curious. If you're in business, when you have your next meeting, talk about pushing a rock up a hill and then have a little bit more meat on the bone. Like that actually, I think is a great way. Ruben, if I came over to your house for dinner, I would not come empty-handed. I'd
Mm.
have a loaf of bread or a biscuit or a bottle of wine or something, but I wouldn't show up empty-handed. And I would say in the business world, in the communities in which we evolve, don't show up empty-handed.
Mm.
So take an interest in some things, think about that, and then make that the thing that you bring with you.
Yeah. So stay curious about
Yeah.
others, about those around you, businesses, even yourself.
Yeah. And
Just
here we
hearing your,
are. You're gonna like maybe when we jump off, look up Diogenes, Sisyphus, like
yeah.
several primal questions. Like as you're curious about the things, it makes me curious. And I might not have time to do it right now, but I'll just like send a note to myself, 7 primal questions.
Yeah.
And then tomorrow or the next day, I'll say, I wonder what that's about.
Okay. Bob, real quick, I know you're very available. You make yourself very available because you put your number on the back of millions of copies of books and you send it out to the world. How, as leaders, because I think it's super important for us to be able to pause and give some people time, give them space, and even for us to be curious in their lives. How do you do that when you are so busy? I mean, I know it's like trying to cram 96 hours into 24, really 18 by the time you take some hours of sleep in there. So how do you, Bob Goff, pull that off?
Yeah, you don't land all the planes on the same runway at the same time because that's like a bad day for everybody. But what you do is you try to get the planes that need to get on the ground first, that are running low on fuel, get them on the ground first, and then you might have the other ones take a lap or two, and then land them. So think about the people there's a famous pamphlet from the 70s called The Tyranny of the Urgent.
Yeah.
Like everything is this loud, loud thing, and oftentimes we go for the urgent rather than what's important. Um, and so, like landing planes at Heathrow on Christmas Eve, they all have to line up, like just one at a time. And
Yeah.
so part of it is just figuring out what plane are you going to land next. And then if one comes out of order, then to say, I don't know if it's like needy enough, then I'm going to let that one take cuts. When I was in law school, I was a busy guy until I met Maria. Then I had all the time in the world for her.
That's a very
Isn't that
important
funny?
plane. Is this
Yeah,
right?
so I know. So you make runway for that.
That's
So I
right.
think the same thing. You guys say busy, 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 then talk to somebody who's a golfer, for instance. They got all the time to play Pebble Beach.
Yeah.
So part of that is just realizing what are the highest values? How can I make sure I'm clear on those highest values? And when people are generally dissatisfied with their life, it's because they're not serving what are their highest values. They're serving someone else's highest values. And
Yeah.
that doesn't make the other person a bad person. It just makes them taking cuts. And then you go like, no, no, I need to, it's not selfish, it's strategic to say, these are really high values. Mine would be legacy. What am I doing about it? Writing books. And then I'm also fielding calls because another high value is availability. And I find that I can usually do both. Like,
Yeah.
and they're interrupted a little bit. And so that's okay. For
Yeah.
someone else, they can't do that. That would like throw the whole sock drawer on the floor. They're interrupted. They're just like, where was I? And so if that is you, then just reprioritize the planes and don't try to land all of those at the same time. For
Yeah.
me, we can land a couple of those pretty close together.
Yeah. And you're also knowing who you are, which you talked about earlier. It's just being
There you
you.
go. Yeah,
So,
yeah. Just be like you. So when I talk, I've got some friends that are like really efficiency persons and you need to do this and that. And they staff out calls and they call people on speakerphones, which I hate. They call them speakerphones. And I always just think that is the least personal way to ever call somebody on a speakerphone. Don't do that. I don't think bad
Mm,
things about them, but I always kind of laugh to myself when somebody calls me up and they're applying for a job and they've got me who has the phone up to my ear and they're talking to me playing gator golf or something on a speakerphone applying for the job. And I'm thinking in my thought bubble, heck no. Are
yeah.
you going to call a billionaire who you might have opportunity to interact with? You're going to call them on a speakerphone?
Mm,
Like, like you read the room.
sure.
So somebody, we don't need to offer words of correction to everybody, but I would say I want to like be accurate in knowing why I'm doing what I'm doing. And to say what I would do is to say to somebody, hey, I'm not, it sounds like you're on a speakerphone. Just give me a call back when you have the phone up to your ear. I'm
Mhm.
happy to talk to you.
Mhm.
But you get to, it's not like a personal attack. It's just you maybe you're busy or maybe some you have an impediment, a physical limitation. That's
Sure.
why it's speakerphone. But when you do have the opportunity to just give me a call, then all number one, be able to hear
Mm,
you. And number two, not feel like I'm more committed to this conversation than you are.
that's right. That's right. Yeah. Okay, great. Well, I want to conclude with one question, which what is Bob's definition of leadership?
Yeah, I think in this beautiful flipping, that's was one of the things in my faith tradition. Jesus was always flipping things around. That there's this um, unlikeliness of saying, if you want to lead, follow. If you want to be first, be last. If you want to do
Mm,
this, so like that idea of recognizing that there's a reverse psychology that happens in this. That there's a reversing. So if you want to be a great leader, be a great servant, like show up
mm.
and to say around our place, everybody takes out the garbage. And I'm usually trying to beat him to the punch. Like I want
Man.
the guy to do that first. And it's not because I want credit, but at the places that you go, get the worst parking spot in the whole parking lot.
Yeah.
Park the furthest spot away
Oh
from
man.
whatever. And again, it
Yeah.
won't be deal. If you're flying in one of those nice seats up in the front of the plane, be the last guy off the plane.
Mm.
And don't tell everybody who passes by you, I'm just being the last guy at the plane.
Doing
Yeah,
this for you.
pretend like you're having
Yeah.
difficulty closing your laptop.
Yeah.
But there's something beautiful. If you start your business day that way, then you will continue throughout the day as a great leader because you'll know you have a really heightened awareness about why you're doing what you're doing. So acting really intentionally, really thoughtfully. I know why I'm doing it. And then just try to fill the room with joy, flood it with just the opportunity of what might be possible. Yeah.
That's so good. I could point to like 4 or 5 different episodes in the last few weeks that we've recorded where it's like you said that, and yes, park it the furthest back. And Tara Newton, a good friend of mine, was on the podcast, and she was talking about praying for all of her company as she walks up from the furthest away parking lot, that it gives her time to reflect and it gives her time to pray for those individuals. And I love that concept of this servant leadership. And it's when God is talking to you and he has a message to say, I think repetition is one of his ways of using it. And so I feel like God is in my earpiece right now, just talking away about this idea of being a servant leader, taking action. You could turn the wheel, but as long as you're not hitting the gas pedal, the car's not going anywhere. So, take action was another thing that you said. And man, Bob, I just it affirms what I've heard before and what conversations have been happening here when I hear you talk about it from your perspective as well. So thank you for sharing
So
that.
good. Well, thank you. It's a delight to see you, brother.
It was great. Well, hey, one more thing before you leave. My
Yeah.
kids would love it if you just gave them a quick shout out. It's Malachi, Hannah, Titus, and Lydia.
Okay, Malachi, Hannah, Titus, and Lydia. You are rocking the world. You're going to be our next leaders. And so love your family, obey your parents, love God, and then just be really pleasant people to be around. It doesn't mean like stashing who you are, and there'll be frustrations along the way, but you're not giving them control of your life. What you're doing is realizing what you're feeling, and then you're saying, you know what, I still want to show up in a really pleasant way in the world. This idea of kindness and respect is all the way through what Paul talked to his friends about. Make a defense for the hope that's within you. And a lot of people stop reading there and they forget the part that says, but do it with kindness and respect.
I think we could all put that message on repeat and listen to that over and over again. Yeah. Thank you for that, Bob. Thank you for joining me today. Such a pleasure. And I'm excited to get this out so we can encourage some people here in Lubbock, but also, worldwide. Thank you.
Yeah, that's right. All right, man.
All right. Have a great day, Bob.